Welcome to the Global Peace Film Festival Lives Online Conversation 2022 Festival Edition. Please join me, Kelly Devine, the Artistic Director, and Nina Strike, the Executive Director, in conversation with Julia Basha behind the project Boycott, which you can see as a part of the 20th Anniversary Global Peace Film Festival, beginning September 19th through the 25th for our in-person events, followed immediately by our virtual events beginning September 26th and ending October the 2nd. All the information about ticketing and how you can see this film and all of the other events associated with our festival can be found at peacefilmfest.org. And now please join me in welcoming Julia Basha with the compelling and very timely film Boycott.
Hi, Julia. It is wonderful to have you with us. And this is actually the third film of yours that we've had in the Global Peace Film Festival. So let's start this out. Tell us about Boycott.
Hi, Nina and Kelly. It's such a pleasure to get to talk to you in advance of having Boycott have its Florida premiere at the Global Peace Film Festival. Boycott tells the story of three Americans from different political backgrounds who decided to sue their states to protest the anti-boycott laws that have now been passed in 33 states and that require public contractors to promise that they will not boycott Israel in order to keep their jobs. And if they refuse to sign such a pledge, they have their contracts immediately terminated.
Well, this is, I think, a kind of an issue that for a lot of people could seem arcane. But what you do beautifully in the film is you show how it goes to the very heart of our democracy, our ability to have meaningful political discourse and exchange. And could you talk a little bit about your approach to, to taking this regulation that could feel as though it wouldn't affect my life at all, and how you can bring it into people's daily lives and their identities as Americans?
The right to boycott has been one recognized not only culturally and politically in American history, but also it's a legal right recognized by the Supreme Court in 1982. And there's a reason for the right to boycott to be protected. It often can be the last resort for communities that are disempowered in order to organize and demand rights and demand equality. So we saw that very clearly in the civil rights movement in America, when African Americans used boycotts, most famously the bus boycotts led by Rosa Parks, and also many other boycotts. For example, the citizens of Port Gibson, Mississippi, organized boycotts of white merchants in protest of continued segregation in their state. And that boycott was actually what eventually led the Supreme Court to issue a clearer ruling in 1982, 15 years later. So it was a long legal case that said that boycotts are enshrined on the highest rung of the First Amendment protections. They are a form of expression. They're a way that citizens band together to collectively express their voice when individually they might not have the power or any impact if they try to communicate the same grievance. Boycotts were also hugely influential on the very birth of America. There is, I think, a long standing tradition, whether there is more mythology than not, of recognizing the Boston Tea Party, the protests against the taxation of tea coming from abroad into American soil as the beginning of the independence movement. There's many people who believe that moment where the British tea was being boycotted led to the beginning of the formation of American identity, as the colonists started only wanting to buy American products. And so there's a lot of history that is ingrained in that tradition. We talk, I think, a lot about the anti-apartheid movement against South Africa as one of the moments where the international community was able to organize and galvanize through boycotts, divestment, and sanctions to contribute to the end of the apartheid regime in South Africa that many people thought was impossible to end. And many other examples like Cesar Chavez and the movement together with Dolores Huerta that they led of boycotting grapes in order to create working conditions that were humane for farm workers, that movement starting in California. And so the right to boycott is something that is critical for social justice movements and will continue to be. You know, people talk about boycotting all the time, right? People on all political spectrum, right? So there are people who were boycotting at one time Starbucks, conservatives, because they didn't like that Christmas was not being allowed on the coffee cups of Starbucks, or when people boycotted Nike products because of their endorsement of Colin Kaepernick. And so boycotting is one of the ways we express ourselves politically. And the idea that state governments are now conditioning public jobs on you having to forego your ability to express yourself politically on a foreign policy matter that has nothing to do with your job, especially at a state level, that is a very dangerous sign of moving towards authoritarian measures of controlling thought in America. And that's one of the ways in which we have seen this manifesting itself, this sort of shrinking role of shrinking space for protest. There are many other anti-protest laws that have been passed across the country, and the anti-boycott law is one of them that I think signal a danger, and it's very important for everybody to be aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. And can you speak though? Again, these are laws that for the most part are passing without a lot of fanfare. So how were you connected to this movement, and how did you find your the people that you interviewed and follow?
I've been working with a team at Just Vision. It's a nonprofit organization that documents stories from Israel and Palestine for about 18 years now. And so until boycott, all of our stories were focused on Palestinians and Israelis in the region who are fighting to create a future of equality and justice for both communities. And when we saw that anti-boycott laws were beginning to be passed in America, that were going to make it impossible for Americans to express solidarity with Palestinians and Israelis who are fighting for human rights and equality on the ground, we knew that it was important to sound the alarm bell. We have been tracking these bills from their beginning in 2015. And when we saw that there were Americans beginning to challenge these bills in court, we felt we have a very compelling narrative arc to really humanize what the dangers of this bill is.
Indeed. I encourage people to watch the film because as you talk about it's a principle, not necessarily a specific issue. That there's even a rabbi who feels one way about the issue that sparks a lot of these laws, but he understands that the underlying principle is being violated. And I think sometimes we can lose that. We can kind of conflate those things, that we may have an emotional reaction to a particular circumstance and sacrifice a greater principle unthinkingly. And I think that's something that your film really brings out beautifully.
Thank you. I think for us, there are many opinions about how to address the inequality that goes on in Israel and Palestine. Some people believe that boycotts are a good strategy and a good tactic, and in some ways, I think a last resort of sorts to hold Israel accountable to the human rights violations of Palestinians. But many people may not think that that's the right strategy, and that's okay. We can have a debate and we can have a conversation around that. What we can't allow the government to do is to step in and say that unless you make a pledge, an oath, that you are not going to support Palestinian human rights through boycotts, you cannot keep your job. That's the government conditioned public employment on political viewpoint. And we really don't want the United States to become a place where that's what the governments are allowed to do.
Well, and that leads me to, in terms of thinking about what to take away from the film, one of the reasons why we were so drawn to programming this film in our festival is that our mission really encompasses action. We seek out compelling stories, of course, but what we really hope is that when the lights come up and everyone is sitting a little taller in their seats, that they say, what can we do? And that we hope to connect them with opportunities to take models back into their own lives, into their own communities. And so is there a campaign around your film, or are there calls to action that you would that you're developing for people?
The reason why I have stayed as a filmmaker within Just Vision is because the organization was designed from the very start to work with films through impact campaigns. So the making of the film is really the start of a much broader engagement with communities around the issues that the film tackles. So Just Vision is partnering with organizations around the country, many of whom are constituency-based organizations or they're advocacy organizations. Just Vision itself is not an advocacy organization. We are a nonprofit media outfit, but there are many groups that are going to be using the film in order to engage their own communities in taking action and organizing. And that's the goal. The goal is for the film to become a tool for people to get more engaged in their own communities. And because these are local bills that have been passed at the state level, there is enormous potential in places like Florida where these laws do exist for people to organize. And I know there are many groups in Florida that people can get connected with if after the film they are inspired to do so.
So tell us what people can do to support support the film and support your work and support Just Vision, and also what's next for you.
So the first thing that we would love for people to see is to come out and see the film. So if you are in Florida, go to the Global Peace Film Festival. Please come out, watch the film. Bahia Maui, who is the Palestinian-American profiled on the film as one of the 3 plaintiffs, will be there for the Q&A. So it should be really moving to get her to speak after witnessing her journey on screen. And we want people to get educated. So after you watch the film, one of the things that people can do is come into the Just Vision website. We have a legislation tracker where you can learn which of the anti-boycott bills have passed in your state. Unfortunately, one of the things that the film highlights at the very end is that what started as a bill that is only targeting the right to boycott Israel is now targeting your right to boycott the fossil fuels industry, your right to boycott the firearms industry, and the right to boycott out all kinds of environmental sustainability efforts that have been beginning to gain traction in America over the past decade. And so those anti-boycott bills are going to be accelerating in the fall. And we really want people to connect the dots that you can't allow a right to slip on one particular issue, thinking that it's going to just stay there. Unfortunately, as we've seen time and again, when we don't defend the rights of all people, they end up coming for all of us eventually. And so I think it's very important for people to find out what's going on at their local level, get connected with organizations that are organizing around it at the state level. People also, if they so feel inspired, they can support Just Vision's outreach campaign. They can support it financially. They can support it by sharing the film on social media. They can support it by contacting their local journalists and asking them to write about this, ask them why they haven't covered this, given the enormous consequences for democracy. All of those things generate the kind of visibility and debate that we hope the film will achieve.
Well, thank you, Julia. This is a lot to think about. It's also important to the bedrock, as you mentioned, of our democracy. And so I thank you for making this film and for sharing your time to explain some of the issues behind it and to give us all of those resources to take action. And thank you all for watching today's Glow. Again, we've been speaking with Julia Basha behind the project Boycott, To find out more information and to delve more deeply into the resources and information that she described, please go to justvision.org. And please do seek out the film, which will be a part of our in-person programming beginning September 19th, running through the 25th, followed immediately by our virtual festival access, September 26th, ending October the 2nd. All of the information about all of our programming can be found at peacefilmfest.org. Thank you, and we'll see you at the next Glow.